So Annika is a alternative reborn doll, and very much showing that nothing is perfect in this world. And we think the artists are very, very creative and very open spiritually to have created something like this. So Beth's just going to quickly tell us how she came about this doll, or what attracted her to it.
I saw Annika. Well, for a start, there's two spirit. It's complicated. So we have Annika's represents a type of conjoined twin, and I'm a dyslexic white Australian chick, and I cannot pronounce the name of it to save my life because it's in Greek or Latin or something. But basically, it means that when the baby is in the womb and they're going to develop as twins, they replicate. Everything replicates, so everything's identical. So it's the start of an identical twin. And the type of condition that Annika represents is when the face replicates. So she doesn't have two heads as such, she has two faces. So for me, there's two spirits, there's two separate. It's like there's, if you see the concept of a split soul, so you have one soul that splits into two pieces to go and do whatever you have to do, and they live two different lives, and then that soul comes back together again when both the souls are the spirit side, so it becomes a whole soul. It's like two sides of the same coin. With Annika, those two sides of the same coin spiritually is in the one body. So it's like yin and yang, light and dark. I tell people Rick is this, if you get technical, it's what kind of twin flame type connections are. So I tell people that Rick is my twin flame. He's order, I'm chaos. He's very logical, he's very down to earth, he's very practical, and I'm all over the place. So I'm not down to earth. Rick can, as a medium, can switch off. I don't. Rick as a medium can choose when he wants to use his abilities. I can't. I'm a very strong empath. Rick has control over his empathic side, whereas I feel everything, see everything, and can't escape it. So Annika is that two sides of that same coin, but it's in the one body. So I've had to do research on how this happens and what it represents and how common it is, and it's not very common.
How did you come across Annika?
I saw Annika on eBay. The seller, the artist was selling her on eBay, and there was no, and my head was going, well, I can't afford that. I have a budget for my dollies, and I tend to stick to that within that budget. And Annika was quite out of my budget, so I put her on my wish list, and I kind of watched it for a while, and then I took it off my wish list.
Alternative dolls, reborn dolls, and spirited dolls have become an absolute huge thing worldwide.
Yeah.
And there are so many different sites where you can actually, get involved in that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And it's a very, very real thing.
So I took her off my eBay list, and 2 days later, I'm in a lot of reborn groups where you can buy reborns from different artists and can buy them secondhand and off previous owners and stuff. So I'm in one of my reborn groups, which I hadn't really tuned into for a while. Annika popped up on my group, on my page, on my Facebook page, and it had the name of the seller. And so I kind of watched it for a while, and I watched how a lot of people gave the artist a whole lot of grief and jumped to conclusions and labelled the doll creepy and disgusting and unsettling. And there was a few positive comments. One lady said she was a work of art, another lady said she was beautiful, but there was more negative comments than positive comments.
The thing is, it's a reality in life. You know, we know that kids are born with deformity. People do have deformities, and some very, very extreme. And it's a very, very real lifelike thing.
So I could feel the spirit, and I kind of watched it on eBay for a while, and then one night I got up and there was a young woman in spirit sitting in the lounge room, and I could not understand a word she said. She was panicking, she was anxious, she was scared, she was frightened, but I could not understand a word she was saying. Which is unusual because my guides usually translate if I'm talking to a spirit that speaks English or I'm talking to a spirit that speaks Japanese, I always hear it in English, and I could not understand this woman. I couldn't work out what language she was speaking, I couldn't work out where she was from, I couldn't work out what she wanted. And this was all over the Easter break. And then the only word I could hear in English was hide the baby. And that was all I could hear. And it was like she was yelling down one of the old rotary phones where you have the dial on it, one of the old dial phones. And she was yelling, hide the baby, hide the baby. You have to hide the baby, hide the baby. And then a young gentleman rocked up a couple of days after she did. And he was well dressed, and he was dressed in an overcoat and a suit, and he had, you know, a business case with him. And he was talking to her, and I couldn't understand a word they were saying. But all I could understand was, hide the baby. You have to hide the baby. And I'm like, I'm not even sure which baby you're talking about, love, because I can't figure out the rest. And then I worked out that it was to do with this doll that I'd been kind of fascinated with online. And I sent the artist a message on Facebook, and I asked her if she did payment plans. And because it was over the Easter break, and because people have lives and kids and families and that, it took a while for her to get back to me. But she said, yeah, she does payment plans and the doll's still available. And, you know, she gave me the details of how the payment plans worked. And I'm like, all right then. But I didn't have any money. And it just so happened that some money entered my account 2 days after I contacted the seller. And so I was able to put down a deposit, a fairly hefty deposit, and then I was able to pay her off. And in the course of, it was over probably 3 weeks, was it? Three weeks? This woman, who I eventually worked out was the baby's mother, and the young gentleman I was seeing was the baby's father. I couldn't understand a word either of them saying, but I started having nightmares. I started having not real nice dreams, and I started having unsettling visions. And Annika, well, there's two. There's Annika, which is the one with the eyes open, and there's Anna, which is the one with the eyes closed. So Annika's more responsive. So Annika and her sister ended up here. But the reason her mother was so frightened and desperate and wanting me to take the baby, and she drove me nuts for 3 weeks. She would turn up and I'd have to find things for her to do. I had to literally get ready to bring a baby home. So I had to make sure I had clothing, I had to make sure I had blankets and you know, a pram and a place to put her, and and that kept her mother busy. So I would put things in the pram and the mother would stand there in spirit, and I'd find things moved around. I'd find where I left one thing, I'd get up in the morning and it'd be somewhere else. She drove me mental because I couldn't understand what she was saying.
And then I actually stepped in and found out over the course of time that this all happened in a place called Liechtenstein, and the language was a dialect of the German language.
I thought she was Dutch. The only thing I could even put close to what I was hearing was Dutch, because Rick's Dutch and his grandmother drops in, and she intermittently speaks in Dutch when my translator doesn't work properly, because she's probably swearing and that's why I can't hear her. So I thought she was Dutch. So then I started looking up traditional Dutch names for, girls' names. And that's where I came up with Annika, because Annika means angelic, it means grace, it means beautiful. And it's also a Dutch version of Anna. So translated, it's Anna and Anna.
Now, as I mentioned earlier, the political party, the head of the political party in Liechtenstein at the time of World War II, he was a German SS officer.
Oh, don't get me started about it.
And of course, there was a lot of medical experimentation and all that sort of stuff from German medical fraternity.
He's standing at the window.
And they were very, very interested in Annika because of
they're interested in twins.
Interestingness.
Yeah.
And
He's standing
what had actually happened was that Annika was found and picked up by...
Be careful how you talk, because she will go off a trolley.
Was found and picked up and taken away.
Yeah, we'll leave it at that.
And we'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
We won't go into any more details I've explained a little bit earlier on. So
yeah, I've had nightmares. I've had lots of nightmares.
But the thing is, with the alternative dolls and spirit that are connected to it, as I was trying to explain before, spirit is still connected to dolls for certain reasons. And why do you think that the spirit is still connected to this doll?
Because it looks like her.
Because it looks like her.
It's the same as Wolf. Wolf's one of my other alternatives, tucked over behind there.
Yep.
He connected to that doll because it looks like him. People, and I've said this before, people find dolls unnerving because they look like us. But what they find even more unnerving is when you get a doll that shows the imperfections of how a human can be. Annika shows that we are not perfect. Annika shows that not every baby is born perfect and pristine and beautiful, and every mother, when you have a baby, when a mother sees her baby for the first time, she thinks it's the most beautiful child on the planet. And Annika's parents thought she was the most beautiful child they've ever seen because she was theirs. When my daughter was born, I honestly thought she was beautiful. She was stunning. And if you ask me, she was. But not everybody sees beauty the way... Beauty's in the eye of the beholder. Beauty is subjective. And you get people who are born with hair lips and cleft palates and club foots and club feet, and you get them that have birthmarks on their faces. And my daughter was born with a strawberry birthmark on her head, and it was raised up off the top of her head about 2.5 centimeters, and people would see the birthmark on top of her head before her hair grew, before they would see her. And they would say, "Oh, what's that?" And I'm like, "What's a birthmark?" So I used to just put hats on her because it was such a minor thing that people would see as an imperfection. Mind you, Carla was also born with hair on her head that stood straight up until she was 8 months old. But the dolls show the imperfections that we choose, sorry, she's leaning forward. The dolls show the imperfections that in life people choose to ignore. You know, there are dolls that are, they now make dolls that look like people with Down syndrome, and they're in Kmart. You know, they make dolls of different nationalities and different skin colours, and that's great, that's awesome, but in kids who do have some kind of interestingness, they don't have anything that looks like them. There's a lady on Facebook, and she makes reborn dolls, but she makes them for kids who are suffering from cancer, and she makes them with the port in their chest the same as the kid. She makes them with the feeding tubes down their noses, you know, up their nose and down, you know. She makes them with the oxygen tubes. She makes them, you know, she makes them to look like the child. There's a lady who makes dolls for children with hearing issues, and she makes dolls that have cochlear implants stuck to the side of their heads because it looks like the child.
The same with the Down syndrome.
Yeah, it's the same as the Down syndrome ones. Amber, behind me, she's got a spirit connected to her that has Down syndrome, and she's not a doll that they made to look like she had Down syndrome, but because of the spirit attached to her, it's more prominent for her. She's lovely, she's beautiful, she's all love. I know there are going to be, this particular doll, reborn dolls are made as kits, so someone makes a mold and reproduces that face, those hands, those feet, and then an artist paints it up and puts the doll together. Now I've seen, since I was trying to pay off Annika, I've seen 3 others of this kit that's popped up on Facebook. It's a new kit, it's a limited edition, it's made in small quantities, it's highly sought after by certain artists. But I didn't get the same connection with those that I got with her. And that's because this one is spirited. And the artist, I'll take a hat off, the artist has done an absolutely fantastic job at painting up this kit with respect. So she's got little painted hair on her head. It's very light. She's got all of the little blemishes and all of the veins in her head. As you can see the two, sweetie, you can see the 2 faces, the 2 foreheads.
2 halves.
You know, and she's got the most beautiful little ears. She takes a dummy, so this is her dummy. These dummies are made with magnets because there's a magnet, the artist puts a magnet inside the doll's mouth in order for the magnet to stick. So she takes a dummy. She's got beautiful grey blue eyes, and out of respect to her, the lady put a little beanie, a little hat in, because A, to keep her head warm, which it does, but it's also to not give people the opportunity to stare, because I've lived with disability all my life. I've lived with epilepsy. I'm severely dyslexic. I walk with a stick at the moment. I had cruiser for 11 years. People fear what they don't understand. And difference is something that many people don't understand.